Okay, hello and welcome again to this third episode with Fernando Carvajal. The AFY has been exploring with Fernando several issues over the last episodes. And today we're gonna, as he promised us, we're gonna go into a more broad perspective of what's going on in Yemen. Welcome, Fernando.
Thank you, Ustad. Thank you very much.
Well, it's always a pleasure to have you. Your thoughts are always, worth listening to. And this is why we're very pleased in the AFY to be working with you on. We're really happy to have this chance to talk to you weekly. Now, as you promised us last week, we're going to dive into the big picture. Where does Yemen fall within the big folders, the big issues on the table of the global community? We're talking about the Iran deal, the ongoing unrest in the East Europe section. So where does Yemen fall within all this mess that is going on?
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And I always appreciate the invitation. Thank you very much. Welcome everyone that's listening to these recordings. I believe this is our third short session. And yeah, among the many topics to discuss is definitely where Yemen falls internationally. But unfortunately, there's a lot of conspiracies out there. There's a lot of misunderstanding on how these things work. And there is definitely a need to put it into the proper box so that it can be analyzed. And so that we can have a better understanding and be able to work better to reach out to the actors and to produce solutions, you know. And as we discussed last week, the idea that the Yemen file primarily falls in hands of Saudi Arabia, as we saw now. It's been a few days now since the talks in Riyadh finished with the announcement of the Political Leadership Council with Rashad al-Alimi as the president. And this was definitely something that Saudi Arabia and the Emirates worked on, right, with the GCC in order to bring order and move beyond the political impasse by uniting all the factions. So in our messages, you brought up the issue of the UN Special Envoy, the office of the UN Special Envoy, and which was founded or created in April of 2011 during the Youth Arab Spring Revolution, with Jamal bin Omar being the first person, the first UN envoy assigned by the Secretary General. The full title is UN Secretary General Special Envoy to Yemen. Jamal bin Omar, some Yemenis should recall his name from the 1994 Civil War, when bin Omar was the deputy to the envoy back then. And today we have the fourth UN envoy, Hans Grunderberg, Swedish diplomat, who was also the European Union's envoy to Yemen, and at one point to the Middle East, the envoy to the Middle East. He is the fourth UN envoy, and he is the second European envoy. His predecessor was Martin Griffiths, who had, prior to coming to Yemen, had worked in Syria. Before him, it was Ismail al-Sheikh. He was the second UN envoy. And adding to the whole mix, we have something that I was personally interested in before 2000, before the year 2020, where I was among a few who said that the US should have a special envoy to Yemen that went directly to the president. So not to rely solely on the ambassador, on the US ambassador to Yemen, but to have an individual with experience that focused primarily on Yemen, on the conflict, And we have Tim Linderking, who was appointed by now President Joe Biden in February 2021 as the president's special envoy to the Yemen conflict. That's his title. And we all had high expectations. I am one among those who in February said, finally, the US is getting involved directly, hands-on, because Linderking has a lot of experience working in Saudi Arabia, working in the Middle East as a diplomat for the State Department. Many of us had high expectations, and I actually recorded a podcast episode following his appointment with a handful of Yemenis and Mr. Nabil Houthi, who all Yemenis should know was worked at the US Embassy in Sana'a.
Right.
So definitely we can discuss both of these positions as they are working today. Hans Grunderberg is already almost a year into his role. He wasn't appointed until late last year, but he basically took over the file in May because Martin Griffiths was then given the promotion from Yemen Envoy to head of humanitarian operations at the UN.
Right, Fernando. I want to come back to Hans Grundberg. He's a special case in our discussion today. Yeah, well, I wanted first to go to see the bigger picture of the issue on how does Yemen fall in within the Iran US relationship.
Yes.
The stand of the US regarding Yemen influenced in any way, shape, or form by the stance with the Iran deal? That
Absolutely.
is obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now,
yeah.
But when we come to Hans Grundberg, you probably noticed in the AFY in our posts, we have mentioned that until now we have not heard him say a single, haven't even mentioned the name of the council that's been created. What does that mean?
Right. I mean, today, Monday, April 11th, Hans Grunderberg is in Sana'a for the first time since he took over as UN Envoy. So the UN Envoy was present during the Riyadh talks. He spoke in the opening ceremony, and he was present in the closing when the council was presented by the GCC Secretary General in Riyadh. He was present and he made some comments, but we have to consider that he could not, in my opinion, he probably did not want to go beyond that because the Houthis from the first instant rejected the formation of the council. So, and we can get into this because I'm very critical of the UN Envoy, period. And you're right.
It's not about being, I mean, a critic. It's about, look, Mr. Al-Hajraf had said this gathering is based on the three references, and the 2216 article or resolution was mentioned, and it's obvious that Mr. Grundberg in no capacity can tolerate that resolution.
Well, no, he has to.
In his line of work, the way his mission is set up is in direct confrontation with the resolution 2216.
Sure.
So, yeah,
but he has to.
What can he now realize? Is it the interest of the Yemeni people that is here at stake, or is it the structure that my mission was based on?
Right. No, I mean, this is something that every UN envoy has had to deal with and been criticized for, that their approach to talks with the Houthis, whether it's Abdul Salam, whether it's Al-Ajri, whether it's Abdul Karim al-Houthi, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, or Abdul Karim Amir al-Din al-Houthi, they dance around reality. They dance around the framework of their mandate. Their mandate, the UN envoy's mandate, is today within the framework of 2216. The recent resolution of February 28 February 28, 2022, specified, reinforced the relevance of Resolution 2216, reminded the envoy and the UN panel of Resolution 2216, reminded the Houthis of Resolution 2216. So the envoy can't move away from that. That is the 2216 is the restoration of the legitimate government in Sana'a. That is the foundation of 2216. So Hans Grunderberg cannot move away from that because that is his mandate. His mandate is to return Hadi, or now the political council, to Sana'a in order to complete the transition that started with the NDC, with the national dialogue. Right?
Yeah, well, if
that
is his mission, Fernando, do you see that he is what is going on then? Why is he
diplomacy?
not...
It is his unfortunately his approach to diplomacy. And Martin Griffith, we have to put it on him. Martin Griffith helped weakened the position of the UN Envoy's office.
Yes.
Even before Stockholm meetings in December 2018. So we have to understand that Hans Griffith is coming in with a legacy, and unfortunately, because no UN envoy has been able to end this conflict, he comes in with Houthis being empowered by the failures of each one before him. So the Houthi approach, which is, their narrative, and we all critique their narrative and their approach, and we all critique the UN envoy for falling in the trap, is that the Houthis right away, let's say today is Hans Grunderberg's first visit, face-to-face visit in Sana'a. The Houthis have the advantage of saying, but sir, Martin Griffith told us this last year, so we need to take it up from there. And to Martin Griffith in 2007 and 2018, they said, but sir, Ismail Sheikh told us this last year, so we have to pick it up from there. And when Ismail Sheikh arrived, they said, but Jamal bin Omar said this to us last year. This is a tactic, very smart by the Houthis, but this is a tactic by the Houthis in order to always keep the line behind the new envoy. So they want the UN envoy to commit to the low bar set by the previous envoy and then start from there. That is a win by the Houthis because they're always...
Fernando, let me ask you straightforward. Can Hans Grundberg really hinder the efforts that is being undertaken? And look, the general feelings of the Yemeni public now is positive with this new political move that took place in Riyadh. Now, can Hans Grundberg really cause a delay in this process intentionally? Yes. And will he do that?
Yes, the short answer is yes. And I know Dr. Mohammed doesn't like my academic answers, my long-winded academic answers. So my short answer is yes. And it starts with what you say, the failure of Hans Grunderberg to be aggressive in the mentioning of the new council and to demand that the Houthis, whether it's in Sana'a or Muscat, sit as soon as possible with Rashad al-Alimi or with Dr. bin Mubarak or with Prime Minister Abdul Malik. That is the first thing that Hans Grunderberg must do. Why? Because of the fact that Hans Grunderberg is in Riyadh, is in Sana'a today, and not 2 weeks ago when he announced, when he was negotiating the cease agreement, is because the Houthis see momentum against them, momentum gaining against them. They see the threat politically and militarily that this political council represents today. Okay, we can't talk about tomorrow because there are a lot of things could go wrong, right, with the council militarily, but today, ideal situation today, all the Yemeni factions, even Islah, under the GCC, are united, are presenting a unified front against the Houthis. the Houthis have become enemy number one, the common enemy of every Yemeni faction today. Okay, so the Houthis see this politically. The Houthis see Aider Zubaydi, Tariq Saleh, Rashad al-Alimi meeting with US officials, European officials, GCC officials, being given $3.3 billion by the GCC, mainly Saudi Arabia, to support the currency, to support the economy, to support the humanitarian response. And all military forces from the Guards of the Republic to join forces in the Tehama, the SDC security belt, Amalaka, and the Yemeni army, all on the same page, meeting with Aidaruz, meeting with Tariq, meeting with Mujali, meeting with Rashad al-Alimi. This is a message to the Houthis. And the Houthis accepted. Hans Grunderberg was in Muscat for 2 or 3 days already before he was given the green light today to fly to Sana'a. So it means that the Omanis also pressured the Houthis and said, look, guys, you need to talk to this guy because momentum is against you at the moment. And
well, Fernando, maybe I believe that Hans Grundberg will try to delegitimize the council. Do you see that a possibility?
But he can't.
Well,
he can't, because
saying
then this is escalating.
Everybody can raise the flag and say this is not
legitimate.
Legitimate.
He would if he works against the council in any way, Saudi Arabia would be his biggest obstacle from now on. And again, keep in mind, yesterday, the UN, the Yemen director of the UN was in Riyadh visiting the GCC Secretary General and the Saudi officials. Why? Because Saudi Arabia, as I mentioned last time, Saudi Arabia, for the first time in years, did not pledge any money to the UN humanitarian efforts on March 16 to 2022. For the first time in 10 years. I mean, ever since 1967.
Yeah, you have explained that to us last episode, and we can go back to it. But let me put the question.
Give me 1 second, Ustad. Give me 1 second, because this is the link. The UN went literally to beg Saudi Arabia, in my opinion. I don't have confirmed information, but went to Saudi Arabia to beg the Saudis to give the UN a share of those $3 billion. To not, because the plan for Saudi is to give this money through Saudi institutions to the King Salman Relief Center and the Foreign Ministry, et cetera, not to give it to the UN in order for the UN to use it. This is huge because the UN is lacking money. And it's huge because the Houthis are pressuring the UN to get more money in order to start humanitarian operations in their territory. If Hans Grunderberg sends a negative message against the council, the UN will not get any money from Saudi Arabia. So this is the way that everything is linking to each other in a very smart way by the GCC, by the Saudis, and now by the council. That should add more pressure to Hans Grunderberg to return with a positive outcome from the talks from his visit in Sana'a. And that is, number one, Houthis need to sit with the council as soon as possible in order to finalize the talks on the ceasefire. Because we all have to agree the ceasefire has not gone like everybody expected, in Marib in particular, right? So Hans Grunderberg must return from Sana'a with a positive note to the council for meetings with the Houthis. If he fails to do that, it merely adds to the image that Saudi Arabia must take full control of this conflict, not just as the lead of the coalition, but as the lead in negotiations. And that would marginalize the UN tremendously, politically and financially.
Okay, clear. Yeah, but now let me, I will not be surprised if within the time that Grundberg is in Sana'a, the Houthis fire a missile somewhere. So I'm not going to be
Right?
surprised if
I mean,
they
they
do
did
that.
yesterday to Madrid, right?
Well,
Yesterday
now that
they
he's
hit
in
Madrid.
Sana'a, let's see. You're saying
Right.
that he went there to try to convince them to cope up with the global move towards peace. Well, this group has proven time and time after that they are not a group of peace. But anyways, let him try. We can say, okay, all we can tell Grundberg is try. But my main concern is, I will repeat to you what he said in the opening ceremony of the gathering on 29th of March. Him and Linder King repeated the same sentence. We will support any local initiatives that will help or be a part of the United Nations strategic plan for implementing peace in Yemen. So they are like taking it exclusively. The solution is the solution that's going to come through the UN office and no other section or
Right.
no other
Right.
body.
And this goes back to your question regarding the JCPOA, the talks with Iran in Geneva. This was a message from the US Envoy and the UN Envoy to remind everybody, even though the UN Envoy is not hosting these talks, we are here, and this must stick to the framework of our work, right? That's basically what he's saying, because he doesn't want Saudi Arabia to think that they can lead the process and they can create a solution themselves. And this is basically natural bureaucratic behavior on the part of the UN Envoy and the US Envoy, meaning if Saudi Arabia takes over this process, the US Envoy's office ceases to exist. Then if the UN Envoy's office to Yemen ceases to exist, it is a blow to the UN Secretary General's mandate. And it sets a precedent for Syria, for Libya, for Sudan, for other conflicts, right? So
but
this is a bureaucracy.
Fernando, as a Yemeni citizen, do you think I really care whether the mandate of the UN Secretary General is blown in his face?
Well,
I mean,
unfortunately,
honestly,
because Yemen is part of the UN, you have to care, unfortunately.
No.
I mean,
Look, if the people now see it so clear forward that there is a solution in the horizon, and the normal way would have been when the council was announced that Mr. Grundberg is in 10 minutes on the plane going to Riyadh to meet the new authority, because this is the legitimacy. He is supposed to be handling an issue that is related to a nation. This nation has a legitimate representative, and he was just appointed officially and accepted. And the guy just did not even care, and did not even mention the issue. What is this?
But keep in mind, the UN Envoy, Jamal bin Omar, helped negotiate the GCC initiative of November 2011, which mandates Saleh step down, Hadi take over, Hadi elected as president through the transition. We are still in the transition process, even though it's 2 years, even though it's way beyond 10 years beyond Hadi's GCC mandate. So the UN envoy has to go back to Saudi and say, wait a minute, gentlemen, remember that we still have the GCC initiative of 2011. Then he has to go and say, wait a minute, gentlemen, you have to remember that we still have the National Dialogue Conference, right? And this is why the Secretary General made it abundantly clear that yes, these talks and the outcome, the transition to the council, to the presidential council, was within the GCC initiative of 2011, because the GCC claimed the initiative in 2011, and the GCC hosted these talks right now, right? Second, yes, we're sticking to the National Dialogue Conference. We have to go back and finish the National Dialogue, said the Secretary General of the GCC, and at the same time reminded the UN envoy, we are doing all of this within the framework of Resolution 2216, because it was just renewed, it was just reinforced on 28 February 2022 by the Security Council in the renewal of the mandate of the UN panel of experts as well, right? So this is political diplomatic jockeying by both. But at the end of the day, the GCC is the one that has the upper hand at the moment, right? The GCC.
Well, my concern is, Fernando, how far can the UN be a reason in delay, like a solution in Yemen? How far will they go? This is what I want to, because the AFY have asked, we have asked the people to go to the streets in support of the new council, just to legitimize it, just in case the UN or Mr. Grasshopper, I call him, tries to do something by officially to delegitimize this whole process.
Here's the thing. Remember, the Houthis have demanded since April 2015 that talks on the peace in Yemen and the solution to the conflict must be held between Houthis and Saudi Arabia. That demand is itself outside of the GCC initiative, and it's outside of the mandate of the UN Envoy. So the UN Envoy at the moment has to maneuver those two realities. Number one, Houthis continue to demand direct talks with Saudi Arabia, not with the government of Yemen, because it's illegitimate to the Houthis, right? Hadi's illegitimate, the council is illegitimate. Two, the envoy at the same time has to maneuver the reality that Saudi Arabia is leading the military and political and diplomatic efforts against the Houthis. So while Yemenis can see it the way you see it, with the envoy trying to work against the solution, the envoy is caught between two narratives that work against his own mandate. So he must bring the Houthis to the middle and say, you need to deal with the government of Yemen under the council today, and then work on a peace with Saudi Arabia. And at the same time, the envoy must tell the Saudis, please keep negotiations within the framework of my office, and I will bring the Houthis to the table. Unfortunately, since June 2018 and the Stockholm Agreement or plan in 2018, the UN Envoy's office continues to obstruct anything that pressures the Houthis to get to the table with the legitimate government. Today, the legitimate government is the political council, whether we like it or not, whether the envoy likes it or not, whether Houthis like it or not. The legitimate government in Yemen today is going to be the council, right? So, in my opinion, the UN envoy should not have gone to Sana'a today, because he went to Sana'a on Houthi terms. He didn't go to Sana'a on his terms, or the council's terms, or the Security Council's terms. He went to Sana'a on Houthi terms. That gives strength to the Houthi position. Houthis are losing in Marib, Houthis are losing in Hodeidah, Houthis are losing in Hajjah, and Houthis are losing internationally, right? Now, I am one to say, of course, I don't want more war in Yemen. I want this to end. Actual fighting, I want it to end. Politics should continue and take their pace in their direction, but the conflict should end. But the only thing that Houthis understand today is strength, is war. And if Houthis do not lose on the battlefield, they think that they're winning. So since they lost Bayhan and since losing southeastern Marib, the Houthis have been on their heels. Next, since the death of Hassan Irlu, the Houthis have been weakened. And this was in mid-December 2021. It was a huge blow to the Houthis. We can see how the impact, the influence that Hassan Irlu had in Sana'a, and how his absence has been a problem for the Houthis since he died in mid-December 2021. And Iran has not been able to replace him. Okay. Next, the fact that the Iranians and the US, the Iranians and the Europeans are very close to a deal in Geneva is also bad for the Houthis. Because once the deal is signed between the US, the Europeans, and the Iranians, the US and the Europeans are going to pressure Iran on Yemen. They're going to pressure them on Houthis with regards to smuggling of weapons, with regards to smuggling of fuel, with regards to smuggling of money, etc. So the Houthis fear losing diplomatic support from Iran. And if Iran wants the Revolutionary Guard the sanctions on the Revolutionary Guard to be lifted, the Revolutionary Guard needs to slow their relations with the Houthis to a minimum. Meaning, if there is one more shipment of Iranian weapons seized going to the Houthis after the nuclear deal is signed, it's problems for Iran. There are problems for Iran. So the Houthis are afraid of a deal in Geneva. That's the honest. Unfortunately, in favor of the Houthis, and again, the way that everything circles back, the Saudis are not happy with the nuclear deal. So the Houthis are waiting for the Saudis to sabotage the nuclear deal between the US and the Iranians in order for the Houthis to regain full support from Iran. You see how they are
yes,
all
I see that, Fernando, but I really cannot swallow it that Iran, who is now under like all this pressure, is doing this to al-Houthis, and once they are under higher like valve release turn, they would slow down. They will even if the
Iran,
West pressure them, or the US pressure them later on, they will not stop. This is their this is why they were created. This is their mentality. This also goes to al-Houthis themselves in Yemen. Our story with al-Houthis does not just start by this new spring, like Arab Spring thing. We have lived this, and you are an expert in this. I know you've already said a lot and wrote a lot of articles about it, the actual existence and the mindset of al-Houthis and the mindset of the Imamate and the Ithna Asharis and all those things. So these are the backgrounds of our issues as Yemenis, which we really are very upset that when the envoy to Yemen, an international entity, sends someone who does not really read or even get into the details of the story of how the humans in this area feel or what they have lived over.
So, to read it worse, Mr. Mohammed, to put it in a worse way, if it could possibly get there. The US envoy to Iran is the former head of the crisis group who used to be fully engaged in Yemen and who visited Sana'a a number of times and talks with the Houthis. And this is why some of us are so upset with what's happened over the last year and a half with regards to Yemen, because you have the US envoy to Iran at the moment, appointed by President Biden, who knows the Houthis, okay? You have a US envoy to Yemen, appointed by President Biden, who knows Saudi Arabia, knows Yemen, and yet the US administration cannot get Yemen right. It's unbelievable how they cannot get Yemen right. When you have two top analysts, diplomats, working on this file, that it has failed to pressure the Iranians on the Houthis. Now, keep in mind, the Iranians were empowered in January. Sorry, I think it was February 2021, when Martin Griffith, the UN envoy to Yemen at the time, for the first time in his 3 years as envoy, visited Tehran. The day before, President Biden appointed Linder King as US Envoy to Yemen. The optics, and you can Google it, and you can see the picture, the optics created by Iran during that meeting was basically saying, Iran, we are at the table now. We are part of the Yemen issue now, which the Iranians had demanded for 3 years. Okay, I served in the UN panel of experts 17-18 to March 2019, and the Iranians demanded that the UN allowed Iran to sit with Saudi, Emirates, US, and Britain on discussions about Yemen. And finally, in February 2021, Martin Griffith traveled to Tehran and sat across the foreign minister in a big long table. And basically the Iranians said, we are here now. We are part of the Yemen issue now. Whereas before, the Saudis and the Americans and the British had worked to keep the Iranians outside of the Yemen file. So, you know, it's just been this constant, you know, 1 step forward, 5 steps back, 1 step forward, 5 steps back over the last 3 to 4 years with this conflict. And some of us have basically said, hey, either the Saudis fix this, however they want to fix it, or the US needs to fix this, however they want to fix it. Because the UN is not going to be able to fix this. They're not going to be able to fix it. You know?
Well, if you allow me, Fernando, I'd like to take you and the listeners now to a little bit of optimistic thinking. Again, there is a general trend, a general feeling in the Yemeni public that is something is good, something is moving, something is happening. And what would you advise the council now to be concerned of and be prepared for in their dealing with the envoy, for example, or the UN and the US?
Right. I think, remember, Hans Grunderberg met with Aidarus and Tariq Saleh in Yemen, right? He went to Mocha to meet Tariq, and he met with the whole of SDC in Aden, which Martin Griffith had not done during his term in office, because he believed that the southern issue was not in his mandate. And so the first thing that you have to tell the council is there must be a united front in dealing with the UN envoy, meaning if Rashad al-Alimi is the president of the council, he needs to deal with the UN envoy. And everybody, all the other 7 members need to give his input, need to give Rashad input and everything, but the head needs to. Why? Because if the relations with the envoy are decentralized and allow, and Abu Sarah and Tariq and Aidarus and Boussani and Al-Alimi, Abdullah, are allowed to meet with the envoy and discuss behind closed doors, this just adds to unpredictability, because every one of them is going to be able to express their individual interest rather than the council's interest, right? So Rashad al-Alimi needs to take the reins of the relationships with the US and UN envoy and needs to dictate terms himself. He needs to dictate terms. Of course, the best optics is for Rashad and the other 7 members to be sitting across Hans Grunderberg and Tim Linder King always together and saying, yes, what Rashad is saying is what we all want. You know, it adds strength to the president.
No, I think what would add strength, in my view, Fernando, I don't want to move from this point, but I will have to, because there are a lot of other questions that are in line for you. The best position for me, if I were to advise the chairman of the council, I'd say I would close the office and all relationship with the special envoy. and I will tell him he has no longer a role to play within the peace process in Yemen, and the Yemenis have found their way. We have formed a council that is going to take charge of our issue now. This would be my
But
best advice.
unfortunately, the council represents the state of the Republic of Yemen, who is a member of the UN. Can't do that.
Why not?
Because it's not allowed. You can't delegitimize the UN.
I'm not good. It's not okay.
That is the process.
What has
you're basically slapping the Secretary General in the face and saying, "Take your envoy and get out of here." You can't do that. There are many diplomatic ways to send a message.
What we need in look, we go back to the Yemeni citizen. Where does his interest fall? Our interests fall within the resolution of the United Nations, not with the very nice attempt or the special envoy. It goes to the resolution number 2216, and it goes to the Gulf GCC initiative. So why are we going to go into details? And people are dying just to please the envoy and not to make Mr. Grunderberg happy.
Well, it's not just about him. It's about the UN Secretary General. I mean, literally, Hans Grunderberg is an extension of Antonio Guterres. Hans Grunderberg doesn't exist as an individual. He exists as an extension of the UN Secretariat, which is led by the Secretary General. If you deny, that is the difference between the Council and the Houthis. The Houthis are non-state actor. The Houthis are rebels. The Houthis can deny access to anyone they want because they don't exist legitimized in international law. They are rebels. They are illegitimate actors, non-state actors. They can claim to be the authority in Sana'a, blah, blah, blah. They can claim to be the Supreme Political Council, blah, blah, blah. They're part of the government of reconciliation, but they're illegitimate when it comes to the UN. The government in Riyadh, unfortunately, and I'm talking about the council, is the legitimate government of Yemen. And that represents the state of Yemen, that represents the seat at the UN, and they cannot...
Well, does Grundberg see that? Does Mr. Grundberg see that the council represents the legitimacy in Yemen? This is important to know.
Go ahead with the question again, sorry.
It was, you said the council is acting because it is the legitimate office and it has to be concerned with the UN and the protocols of dealing with the UN. So my question was, does Mr. Grundberg recognize or realizes that this is the legitimate representative of Yemen?
He has to.
Well,
because he's got no other. He can't go back to Hadi. He can't go back to Hadi. Right. He has to show it. We have to wait until he comes back from Riyadh. I mean, from Sana'a. We have to wait to his announcements from Sana'a. But I mean, literally, Hans Grunderberg has no other option. He can't. Hans Grunderberg, as UN envoy, has to deal with the government of Yemen, who's a member of the UN, right? Yeah. And the representative of this country, of this government, is Rashad al-Alimi. He has no other option. He has no access to Hadi.
How can the Yemeni people now, the reason we can say this in the alternative for Yemen is straightforward. We're not a political party. We're not politicians.
Right.
We are a social solidarity movement that is that puts the Yemeni citizen in the center. I could care less about how like X or Y from people or entities would feel. My main concern is the Yemeni citizen, and he's the core of the interest. So we're free. I mean, I don't have to worry about being politically correct because we are a social solidarity movement and not a political party. So the question is, do you think that the Saudi and the Gulf move now can go all the way through without the recognition of the envoy's rule, or not even talking to him? Can we finish the deal without the envoy deal?
He's going to, trust me, Hans Grunderberg, if he wants to stay in his job, he has to recognize the council. That's a given. That's not in question. That's a given. Now, to your question, with regards to whether Saudi and the government can move away from there, of course they can. The Riyadh agreement was signed outside of the UN Envoy's office in 2019, November 5th, 2019. It was negotiated, it was mediated by Saudi Arabia. It was overseen by Saudi Arabia. This transition to the political council was called for and overseen by Saudi Arabia. So, of course, Saudi Arabia has shown the UN that they can move beyond the UN. You know, and because the Emirates were involved as part of the GCC, the Emirates were involved in these talks in Riyadh. The Emirates sit in the UN Security Council today. They are the Arab representative in the Security Council today. So at any time, the Emirates can call a meeting for the council and propose a new resolution or propose new language or something. So there's always those quote unquote threats to that the UN envoy has to consider. I mean, and then consider this: Saudi Arabia and the GCC can always go to New York and sit with the Secretary General Antonio Guterres and say, "Sir, we believe that this special envoy person is no longer in the interest of resolving the Yemen conflict, and we need him replaced." I mean, this is diplomacy. You can't shut the door on him. You literally can't shut the door.
As you said, Fernando, we're not politicians. Earlier, I said our best advice is to tell Mr. Rashad Al-Alimi to tell Mr. Grunderberg to pack your bag and get out of here. But you said it nicely. But hey, we're not politicians.
I mean, Rashad Al-Alimi can go to New York and sit with Guterres and say, "Sir, we want your help. We want your good offices. We believe that it's essential, vital that the UN is involved in order to bring Iran and the Houthis in line and move forward. But this particular individual is not going to accomplish it. We need you to nominate another." I mean, that is the diplomatic way for them to do it. You know,
right.
They can even welcome Hans Grunderberg reluctantly, and during the meeting say, "Hey, you're not doing it for us. We're going to ask for you to be replaced."
Okay.
I mean, they can do that. They can express it in a certain way where they said, "We're not happy with him." Remember, the Houthis government said it right after the Stockholm Agreement, when the Houthis failed to keep their end of the agreement in Hodeidah, and they played this role where, you know, half of the people switched uniforms into the other side and gave the put out these pictures and everything of handing over the port and blah blah blah, and everybody was upset at Martin Griffith. The GOI said, "We do not believe Martin Griffith is working toward peace, and he is acting on behalf of the Houthis. He's giving them too much weight." I mean, they said it. They've done it before. And Hans Grunderberg was in a bit of trouble. Ismail Sheikh, before he resigned, was in a bit of trouble. Jamal bin Omar was in big trouble with Saudi Arabia and the Emirates toward the end of his tenure. And so everything has a diplomatic solution, and there are always diplomatic ways to pressure someone, like the UN envoy in particular.
Well, we're very pleased, Fernando, for us to have you as our advisor on the political part, because we're not a political party. We are a social solidarity movement once again. So we're very pleased to have you on board to be enlightening us with these issues. We have Dr. Muhammad Al-Faqih with us here if he wants to say something before we wrap up. It's been almost 1 hour. Muhammad, Dr. Muhammad, are you there?
Yeah.
Hi.
Oh, hi. I am really enjoying with your discussion, and I hope that next week we can make all the discussion about the shadow government, if you can. But in general, Master Fernando maybe more or understanding. He has more understanding than many politics Yemeni people or Yemeni leaders. That's really important for us to listen, and we can be patient. And all the time, I'm happy with his answers, really. Don't worry,
Thank you,
Fernando.
Doctor.
Really, I am. We
Yeah.
can, make all the decision about the shadow government and what we can do, and we can ask Master Fernando as well. We need to know more and more about the democratic system in the West, how the shadow governments can do, or because we need we still a new experience in the area, not just in Yemen.
That's a very good question. Fernando, do you have a quick answer for that?
On which question, Ustad? Sorry.
Well, here's the deal. He said they have formed like a shadow government, and this shadow government exists in advanced like democracies in the West. They have worked. They wanted to know what are the basics, or how does it work to fit it in within the globe work of Yemen.
Right. Well, the example is Britain, right? Britain in a parliamentarian system creates a shadow government from the opposition, from the quote unquote losing parties, right? To the minority. And this is taken from members of parliament. So they create a shadow government that has access to each ministry and is able to discuss government policy and produce papers and be openly critical or supportive as well of the government. It is usually something from inside, not something that exists completely outside. In other areas, a shadow government in other countries has come from rebel groups or losing parties outside of government. So in Mexico, for example, I'm Mexican. I was born in Mexico. I'm a Mexican origin. In Mexico, the current president of Mexico, when he first lost the presidential election 12 years ago, I think it was, he announced a shadow government because he believed the election was stolen. So he announced a shadow government, and then he had, he named people to this government, etc. And then he had daily, press conferences. So it all depends what you want to do with this idea of a shadow government. I think in the case of Yemen, where the government is outside, where there is no parliament, where there are competing political parties, I think a shadow government as a non-governmental organization would be a great idea, because a lot of the things that you have discussed here, Ustad Mohammed and Dr. Nadine, to the alternatives for Yemen, a lot of that could be not merely discussed in normal conversation, but discussed within the structure of government. So basically, you are exercising how the government should approach a policy, design a policy, and implement a policy, right? So let's say it was the internet in Yemen. So, the prime minister and which other ministers would handle this portfolio and what would they do? So it would be an exercise on how to be done with the existing constitution, with existing laws, etc., and then present a paper to parliament with Barakani or to the prime minister and say, hey, the government of Yemen, of the Republic of Yemen, should discuss this proposal, because this is how we improve internet in Yemen.
Exactly.
Or, that's one of the roles that such
But
an exercise could play.
Go ahead. I need to be clear that our shadow government, it exists in Yemen, inside. Most of the members, the ministers, they are living in Yemen, but we don't want to announce their where
This
they
is
live in
right.
exactly,
Well, no,
but they
Fernando,
are
Dr. Muhammad, Fernando was talking about a more like how the thing work, not individual, whether the individuals here or there. I get it, but the system is so weak for you to be recognized in the normal way that happens when the situation is stable. So, and if you move towards social.
To be honest with you, we are going to be a political party
Good.
soon. But as Fernando said, I'm happy with his answers and declaration, really, that we really try to get a very good experience. And still, because the legitimate government is still outside, and all of us, we are outside, and the militias who rules the country nowadays, the Hukuma Sharia, it's not doing what they should do. Really, we need to be patient and go step by step and slowly. And
Right.
we need more advice from the people who has more experience, like Fernando and the academic people. And but we still at the first point, really.
Thank you very much, Dr. Muhammad. Fernando, to conclude this, I will leave the mic to you, but with one last question. Considering what we have all said about the council and the legitimacy, and what would you advise the Yemeni individual or the Yemeni street to do? We have called for like demonstrations in the already free states to go and demonstrate in support of the council. What would that be a good thing for the council if the people go out?
I mean, any public support for the council is positive, and it reinforces their legitimacy, right? So yes, and any time that there's a public gathering, and I mean, as soon as we already read the memo from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that all Yemeni diplomatic missions and government institutions need to take down Hadi's picture and put Rashad al-Alimi's picture up. So I mean, if you start seeing, you know, individuals, people, citizens anywhere in Yemen coming out with Rashad's picture, coming out with supporting the council itself, etc., of course it adds to legitimacy of the council, and it tells Martin Griffiths and I mean Martin Griffith, it tells Hans Grunderberg and others that, hey, you know, you can't go against the people's opinion. If the people are supporting the council, then it's legitimate, and you need to deal with it, and you need to force the Houthis to recognize it and deal with the council itself. So, I mean, any public expressions of support, positive support, are legitimizing the council and are good for the council.
Great. Thank you very much, Fernando, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you very much again. Thank you, Dr. Mohammed. Thank you for the invitation.